All right, welcome everyone back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy. I'm your host, Jenny Fennell, CRNA, and today we have a guest episode, a special guest episode. Marissa here is a current SRNA, and I'm super excited to bring her on the show today because I wanted her to share her experience being in a front-loaded program. I get asked a lot by students who are like, Jenny, I got accepted to multiple schools. I don't know how to pick between a front-load and integrated program. What do I do? And while I try to explain it, I've had one experience myself, which was integrated. And so I wanted to bring Marissa on today to kind of we'll just talk about it. She's a current student. So obviously my experience is getting old at this point, but we'll kind of share our experiences with you. And Marissa, if you wouldn't mind kind of telling everyone a little bit about your nursing background and kind of how you chose CRNA.
All righty. So hello. My name is Marissa. I am in my second year of CRNA school right now. I am doing full-time clinical. Like Jenny said, I am a front-loaded program, so I finished all of my didactic and am now in my clinical portion. I was working in the ICU for 6 years before I applied and got into CRNA school. I knew I wanted to become a nurse anesthetist when I was actually 13 years old on a medical mission trip with my parents. I fell in love with anesthesia even before I really knew a whole lot about what that meant. And from that point on, that's been the goal until right now. So yeah, I worked in surgical, I worked cardiac, neuro, trauma, and medical ICU. So I had all of the ICU backgrounds going in, which was very helpful.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. So that's really cool. Just out of curiosity, what do your parents do that took you on a mission trip?
My dad was a RT for 15 years and then was a pacemaker rep. So worked in that regard. And then my mom's been a nurse for 30 years and she works in GI. So she works with a bunch of CRNAs and endo, which is everyone's favorite place, right?
Very cool. All right. Awesome. Well, welcome. And I'm excited to have you here. So just a FYI, if you're sensitive, I am dealing with a little upper respiratory cold. So if I sniffle or cough, I apologize from the get-go, but I'm going to try my best. I'm going to let Marissa kind of take the show here today mostly, and just bear with me if hopefully I don't cough in your face or your ear, I should say, not your face. All right, so to kind of start off, when you started your program, what would you say you kind of started with your syllabus? What did you start doing? Was it DNP work? What kind of anesthesia courses were you taking, if any, or was it all DNP work? Just so people kind of get an idea.
So luckily for me, I am one of the last master's programs still. So I'm not in a DNP program. So I know that's going to look a little bit different, but for me with front loaded, we just started with basic courses. We had anatomy and physiology. We had biochem, and then we had just a little like sprinkle of like basic anesthesia background kind of stuff for my very first quarter. And after those prereqs kind of got out of the way, the second quarter we hit the books hard with like all anesthesia nonstop.
All right, cool. I don't know. I didn't realize that, but that's good to know. So in case you guys are wondering, from the programs that I have talked to and discussed, now they're all different. So obviously take this with a grain of salt, but just from the programs I've discussed with, most of the programs will do a similar type of curriculum where they're going to maybe like a nursing theory course or some kind of pathophysiology course, along with introducing like the DNP project course as well. So they do tend to try to blend the two, but it's like she started with like anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and some intro to anesthesia. They'd probably replace some of that with maybe instead of biochem, for example, you would have like a DNP course. And so they would still kind of mix the two together a little bit from my personal experience. But okay, so first it was mostly kind of general courses, then you went to more anesthesia courses. Was that for an entire year then that you spent doing kind of like this didactic work?
Yeah. So with the front loaded programs, it's all, like I said before, we don't have any clinical. It's all book work, like Monday through Friday. That's funny. Sunday through Saturday. It's all like you're busy 12 plus hours a day working on just classwork, whether you're in class or you're out, you're studying something regardless. So it started to get really heavy. I mean, it was heavy from the start, but second quarter to fourth, it was all just anesthesia. So we would have a course that was strictly more anesthesia implications. And then along with that course, we would have physiology that tied in with that subject of anesthesia. So for example, like if we were in our cardiac section, our anesthesia course would be like, okay, anesthesia care for the cardiac patient. And then in physiology, we'd be learning pathophys of cardiac. And then aside from that, we would also have our pharmacology class, and we would be going into all the cardiac pharmacology. So it was kind of nice that it was separate classes, but they timed everything to where it was all conjoined by each system. So respiratory, renal. So that was really helpful for how heavy it was. So at least if you were in one class, you were in a way studying for your other two, or at least trying to pull it all together.
Right.
It was really good.
Yeah, that's actually very nice. Mine was definitely, I don't remember mine being like that. It would have been really nice.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah. And for you guys, I was in an integrated program now. Granted, they are moving to DNP. And so I do know they're staying integrated. However, it's going to feel more front loaded because of the DNP project. It's going to take more time with less time in clinical, essentially in the first year, but they are still going to be in clinical the first year. So it is going to still be considered integrated. But like my experience was, the first summer semester, whatever you want to call it, was like kind of the intro work. And we ended up ending that semester with 4 observation days in the OR, just once a week, where the second semester we actually started clinical. So we literally barely even had 1 semester of anesthesia school before we actually were in clinical. And again, it started off with like maybe 1 day a week. We would, after maybe by the end of that semester, we were 2 days a week. Then going into the third semester in anesthesia school, we were 2 to 3 days a week, depending on our class schedule. By the end of the whole last year, my program, I was in clinical 4 days a week and only in class 1 day a week. And so again, I do remember there being times where, again, I would be having to learn, say, cardiacs. I was in my cardiac rotation, but we would be learning pediatrics in class. And so it was like, trying to study 2 specialties was insanely overwhelming. And kind of to back up a little bit as far as like 12-hour days. And now, mind you, 12-hour days in the sense that you're getting up usually around like 5 in the morning. And then usually by time, like you may be eating dinner by 6 o'clock at night, but you're also still hitting the books again. It doesn't mean that you're going 12 straight hours of studying, but that's a whole day. That's traveling to and from class. That's maybe taking a lunch break. That's, yes, studying and reading in between and doing some assignments. But you're also getting some built-in breaks. So let's kind of talk about that. When you start off your didactic so heavy, how did you break that up so you weren't studying for 12 straight hours?
Well, the correct answer from me was procrastination. And I figured that out very quickly, that needed to not be how I took my breaks. Because, and a lot of people, it's even more lengthy, but I was out of school for 6 years from nursing school. And so coming back into school and not having been a student for 6 years, it's kind of hard. And I was just one of those students in nursing school that just hated studying. Like some people, they love school, they get super into it, they're just good at school. And I'm just somebody that's just not. So it takes a lot of focus for me and a lot of determination to be able to plan out my day. And I think, other things are, I'm a really slow studier. I am like super distracted by everything. And so unfortunately for me, the days were a lot longer because it would take me 3 hours to get to know this certain quote subject that it took my friend, who lives down the street, 1 hour. So I think it totally depends on how you study too. The biggest thing is just like prioritization. There's too much. You're never going to go to bed ever thinking like, okay, you know what? I did everything today. Because I don't know, to me, that just wasn't the reality. And anyone I talked to just would never say that. They'd be like, I tried, I'm always behind. And that seems to be like the quote of CRNA school, is I'm always behind.
Yeah. So I'm glad you said that, because you're right. It can feel that way, you guys. And for current students who are listening, you're like, yes, why? And so first of all, know that you're not alone. Yep. Second of all, it's meant to feel this way. And let me kind of put some perspective on this. You are learning effectively feels hard and feels like you're not achieving anything because you don't see instant results. And it's like, man, I promise you, the way they've designed this curriculum, the way they challenge you are exactly where you need to be to learn. And I'm saying this because like you will get to boards and you're like, then you'll reflect back finally when you can finally be like, big deep breath in. Now that I've like officially done my last day in clinical, and you're like, look back and you're like, holy freaking cow. how did I just learn all this? Because you don't even realize you're doing it, and try, because this is going to feel like you're not learning it. You're going to feel like, man, I'm still struggling. But as you struggle, you learn. Effort equals learning. And I stress this in my How to Study Effective lecture. Now, don't get me wrong. Like Marissa said, she found out pretty early on that she was a procrastinator, which is great that you identified that. Secondly, she took steps to mediate that, to make it more efficient for her. And doesn't mean your experience as your classmates are going to be the same. No, it does not. So please do not say just because so-and-so can spend an hour doesn't mean that you should spend an hour. You were all a little different, and some subject matters are going to be easier for you and vice versa. And take the time that you need, but recognize when you maybe need to change it up a little bit and try different strategies.
Yep, for sure. Everyone is different. You can't compare.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit now about clinical lab experience. I know you just started clinical, and I'm kind of questioning, did you feel ready from your clinical simulation experience to go into the OR?
No.
I'm glad you're honest though, because I would tell you I didn't either from mine. So I'm glad
anyone that says that they were should have an eye out on them a little bit. It's just, I mean, it's not reality. Like, we know that. Given, like, side note, so my lab, we had COVID. We were like fresh COVID when when we started our lab time. So we did get a little bit of lab time taken away because we weren't able to be on campus for a couple of months. But my school was great in that they were able to really make it up, and they allowed us to kind of book private lessons almost with our instructors. And so we had our big sim lab, and so like a group of like 2 to 4 of us would like book an instructor, and they would have these sim labs, be like, okay, they would do like, okay, bradycardia from like an X lab or something, and then they'd do it on the vitals, and that was good practice for us. And then a lot of those scenarios, of course, they did really common anesthesia ones that we should know how to take care of, and it actually really does help. But with lab, you know, I'm sure school requirements are probably pretty minimal. Like, I think our assigned lab hours was maybe only like 2 hours a week, I think, which is just, nobody's actually just doing 2 hours. Like, you're living in there when you have time. So it's all about the time and the effort that you put into it when you're in lab. You know, the mannequins are there, the resources are there for you. It's about if you want to commit that time to yourself and learn from it. And that's the more prepared that you're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I remember our labs was kind of more of a free for all. Like, this is your designated time to use it, but it was up to you to essentially do it. Yeah. And we would have group discussions about different lab areas. But then from there, it was more just like, okay, now you go and do those things. But it wasn't, we actually never even, I don't remember. I mean, this is me a long time ago, though. I don't remember running through scenarios. Maybe we did, I don't remember. But I definitely don't remember feeling like lab ever prepared me for the real experience, in the sense that, like you said, you know, it's not real. And I kind of feel like it's hard to, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think you should do mock experiences. But there's something to be said about the real thing. So I guess, like, how did that feel for you, since you had been out of the clinical world for about a year and a half prior to when you went back into clinical? So how did you feel about making that transition?
I don't think it was too difficult. Like, once you're a nurse for like a few years, you really can't take that from you. I think the weirdest part is that it's just in an environment that you're just not used to. Like, no matter how many years ICU experience, even if you have 20 years of ICU nursing experience, you're not going back to the ICU, you're going to an OR, which is foreign to you. So that was kind of the thing. It's like, no matter how good I am at, you know, communicating with the patient in pre-op, you know, like that wasn't hard for me to get used to quickly, because I've talked for years with patients. But it's, you know, okay, the setup of the OR, and then hooking the patient up to the monitors like that way, and then, you know, the flow and the different dynamic in the OR, it's all like completely new to you. So I didn't notice a whole difference of, that year off of just being in a hospital. That didn't really, I don't think that would have played any part in how new the OR like environment is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's reassuring too, for people who are kind of afraid of that. Because it's going to be new for everyone. Doesn't matter how long. It's just a different environment. It's different tasks at hand, different type of knowledge that you're bringing forth versus your ICU days. And so regardless of being out of the clinical realm, you're still going to kind of feel kind of like a fish out of water at first.
Yeah.
But like Marissa said, she felt some things were a little bit easier, like pre-opping the patient, because she was very comfortable talking to patients. I know, like me, even though I felt comfortable talking to patients, I was terrified of sounding stupid. So like, I remember bringing my little clipboard and like being terrified I was going to forget to ask him like a pertinent question, and having my preceptor be like, so did you ask him this? And he'd be like, no. And then I'd have to go back and
still
ask.
happens.
Oh yeah. And I'd have to go back and be like, can I like do a second assessment, you know? And
Can you
like,
open your mouth? I forgot.
Yeah, right.
Dang
Right.
it.
But it happens, right? And even guess what, you guys, here's a funny thing. It even happens after you've been a CRNA for a while. Like you're like, oh darn, I forgot that one thing. And so no big deal. Just go back and just politely say, hey, I actually meant to ask you this question. Would you mind sharing this? Or, you know, maybe I forgot to do the blood consent or whatever it is. It's okay. It's okay to forget. And just embrace the fact that it's a new environment and not to worry about being rusty, because you're going to be, and give yourself some grace and knowing that it's only going to get better. So what did you find hard about learning all the information up front before clinical? And have you found it necessary to maybe refresh yourself on some knowledge now that you're in clinical?
I think that's what people bring up the most in regards to like front loaded programs, of whether or not, oh, is this going to work for me? Is it not? And it totally depends on the person, but at the same time, it's going to be hard either way you go. So yeah, it is super hard to learn everything up front and not be able to see that clinically. You know, you basically are just memorizing a bunch of facts and trying to envision in your head how it's played out in the OR when you're studying for didactic, but you really have no idea like how that looks. And now that I'm in clinical, I'm like, okay, like I remember learning that. And I'm like, yeah, like, okay, that actually like did matter. And like, here's a, like, you know, an application to it. You're like, okay, cool. Like, you know, they seem to know what they're doing with this. I think it is, you know, having to go back. Absolutely. And I think regardless of program, whether you're integrated or front loaded, you are going to hopefully have to go back and review things the night before, because there's just no way for you to memorize all that information regardless of front loaded or integrated program. Like if I find out I'm doing a cardiac case, I'm biased towards cardiac because I worked cardiac for a long time. I'll just keep using that as an example. But say I have a heart the next day and they have these comorbidities, then yeah, like you should be looking up stuff that applies to anesthesia, unless you're like brilliant and have all of that in your head. But it's just too busy, you're too tired, and you had that lecture like 6-7 months ago. So, and even with people that I've talked with integrated programs, a lot of the times they don't totally match up. So if they did have that cardiac patient, maybe they haven't had their cardiac lectures yet, and that's scheduled a month before. So that's kind of like scary. And at the same time, you're reviewing it anyways. So, you know, both programs have their ups and downs for sure, but you know, you're reviewing for sure the night before.
Yeah, exactly. And Marissa made some really good points, you guys. I know, like for us, our first year of clinicals is all general rotations, meaning we didn't do any specialties until our last year, which that's because that's when we actually hit the part of our anesthesia program where we learned pediatrics, where we learned cardiac, where we learned OB. The problem was you never knew where your rotation was going to fall in cardiac. And like for me, like we learned cardiac after my cardiac rotation. So I had to study on my own, learn it to the T without even addressing it in class and getting my questions answered. Yes, that was very hard. Yes. Did it stress me out? Yeah, heck yeah, it did. I relied heavily on students who came before me and asked a lot of insights, who were at that clinical site, how to set up the room, what they like, you know. So use your upperclassmen to pick their brain, or even students who have been through the rotation before, because I was not the only one that had that experience. You know, so there's something to be said. And like Marissa said, you will always have to review. Doesn't matter whether you're front loaded or integrated, you will always have to review the material. So I'm glad you said that. Another thing too is let's kind of talk about board prep, because at least for me, when I started board prep within the first semester of school. And so has that kind of been your experience too?
They'll with each lecture, they'll always like hit on the points like, okay, this is like a classic board type, like topic, board type. And so, and the good thing with my school is that, you know, and I think this is all schools really, is that their tests are very much focused on how boards like to ask their questions. They were very repetitive. So we would throw in, you know, cumulative at the end of quarters and stuff like that to really hit hard on topics that are very common on boards. Now with us just doing straight clinical, of course, it's easy to, you know, you're exhausted. I get up at 3:45 for this last rotation because I had an hour commute. So I'm up at 3:45. I'm driving an hour. I'm at clinical for 12-ish, maybe sometimes more hours, an hour drive home. The last thing I want to do is to just like on my own time casually like browse board questions. And so luckily for me, my school assigns those Apex workbooks, which hold us accountable for studying for boards. And so we have one of those Apex workbooks due every week with the proctored exam on a Sunday. So it's busy, but you know, would I be doing that and holding myself accountable if my school wasn't making me do that? No.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I also want to remind you guys who are stressing out front loaded integrated is there's built-in review, which is board prep. So even if you worry about going back to all your old notes, don't get me wrong, you will, but most schools built in some kind of board preparation, which essentially is your way to review material because they do categorize board prep in specialty areas and different things like that. So, and like Marissa said, she's held accountable. That's actually, I don't remember being held accountable for board prep. They probably should have, because I don't think everyone did it. I remember getting behind occasionally, but like, I also like, you know, you said you're a procrastinator. That's actually one of my, like, I have a sister who's like that and I love her to death. Like she's my best friend, but like, I'm the opposite of that. Meaning I get so much anxiety when something is like looming over me that I just get it done. It could be like a month ahead of time. And I'm like, yes, it's done, you know, but like, I just can't stop. I won't sleep. I won't eat until something's done because and that's obviously not good. Right. I mean, that's a problem. Well, it's like
either way.
Yeah, either way, bad, like totally type A, can't just like let go or like, you know, so they're good and bad for their own reasons.
Yeah.
But I remember sticking up with my board prep because that was what was assigned to us, but we weren't held accountable for doing it. But in the long time, what I did at the very end of my schooling is I took boards in 9 days because I was like, well, I've already done this 3 times. Like I should be ready by now. Like I never slacked off, but, you know, so don't worry too much because schools want you to pass and they want you to be good. They want you to be ready. So, I guess ultimately what I wanted to point out was you're going to have some kind of review built into your schooling anyways. So let's talk a little bit about, traveling for clinical. I know you mentioned you'd go an hour there and an hour back. That's a lot. 3:45 is early, girl. What?
Yeah.
Like you're getting there at 4:45? Like what is it a heart rotation or what kind of rotation is it?
No, just everything. I like to get there like an hour and a half early. So if I'm up at 3:45, by the time I leave the house, it's like 4:30, get there at 5:30 for a case at 7, you know, 7 a.m. start. So I'm not too crazy.
So you're getting in the parking lot at 4:45. You're not in the OR till 5:30?
Yeah, I'm driving an hour. So okay, I'm up at 3:45.
Oh, up at 3:45. I'm thinking in the car. Okay, gotcha.
No,
5:30.
oh,
well, I guess that makes sense. I guess that makes sense. I was just trying to wrap my brain around it. Like, I don't know.
No.
That's so early. I remember getting up at 4 a.m. for my clinical days, but like, I think the furthest drive I had was about an hour, but they didn't start till 8.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
helpful.
Yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah.
One of my other sites started at 6:30.
Oh gosh.
So at 6:30, I was like, oh my God, then I was there at 4:30 in the morning, pretty much.
Right. Yeah, it depends on where you're at, but yeah, that's the longest commute. So that one I just finished up on Friday. That was my last day at that rotation. My next rotation is only a 30-minute commute, which is great here in my hometown. And then in regards to travel, like you said, so every school is so different. So definitely like when you're looking at applying for schools or you got into a school, make sure that you have all that information before you start, because it is a huge undertaking. It affects your entire life. You know, if you're married and then, you know, I think I calculated because somebody asked me on Instagram that 40% of my class has kids. So that is also, if you guys have kids, like you have to have that serious conversation with your significant other. How is this going to look? One of my best friends in the program, she is going to have to move to Texas in about a week, and she has like a 2-year-old and or a 2-year-old and like a 3-year-old.
Oh, gosh.
And she's going to have to leave her kids here because it's not realistic for her husband to just quit his job, because our rotations, and depending on school, I know some people have rotations only a month that you're traveling. Ours are 3 months each. So it really is kind of a short time span that you're not going to just pick up your family, find an apartment, try and rent out your house that you already have, or you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's something to really take into consideration, that you can't just pick up, your family and pop them around. Some people do, like my another good friend I have, she has 4 kids. And so her husband is the one that watches the kids. He had to quit his job to support her and the family during CRNA school, which is also something that people need to have conversations about. Because somebody's got to take care of those kids, right? And so like, it's hard.
You need to get what's those robots that sweep the floors. They need one for like
Yeah. So for her, she's somebody that decided to take her family with her with each rotation. So, it's really hard. And even so, it's like, you're like, oh, the family's going to be together. You're still probably going to be gone for at least 12 hours out of that day. And then you're coming back, and then you're having to do your board prep, and then you're going to bed. So yeah, it's really hard. And luckily, like I said, my rotations are 3 months each. So at least we have time to kind of get used to the facility. We get to know people. Whereas I worked with a couple of SRNAs at this last rotation, and they had 1 month long rotations travel. And I'm like, holy crap, like that's hard. And maybe some people like that, but at the same time, it's like, you're just trying to figure out which hallway is the right hallway, and then you're moved to your next rotation.
Yeah.
And then one more thing, just to kind of throw on, and something that you guys should ask schools about as well, is your rent or housing, is that going to be covered? Is that going to be helped by your school? Or are you completely on your own? My school, they have nothing to do with it. It's all us. So I just booked we did an Airbnb, me and 2 other girls, at a couple of rotations down the road. And so that's kind of what a lot of people do, is they'll get an Airbnb, and it's just a long-term rental for 3 months. And other people, like the girls that I worked with at this last rotation, their school provided the housing. So definitely something to keep in mind and add into your, financial planning when you're applying, when you're deciding between schools, because it does add up for sure.
Yeah. And just the added stress too of figuring it out yourself. I think that's a lot to be said. And like
all your spare time.
Yes, exactly. All your spare time after your 12-hour day.
Yes.
Yes. I know I've helped a lot of students who come to our hospital from, say, Arizona or even California, who've reached out to me because they know me, they figure out where I work, and trying to help them find housing. Some of the CRNAs I work with do have houses they rent out to students, which is nice. Even some of the docs do as well. But a lot of them do Airbnbs or like extended stay, hotel-ish condo places, I guess you could call them. And so when schools make it so you don't have to worry about these things, you pay for it, but it's in your tuition. So it's not really free, but it's at least covering your tuition expenses, which I think is nice. And then also just the less of the burden of trying to figure it out yourself. Cause like for me, like trying to come to an inner city, which is where most hospitals are, and then trying to find a place that's close by, but safe is another thing too. You have to really, cause people reach like, Jenny, is this area safe? And I'm like, ooh, no, don't go there unless make sure you don't put any pennies in your dash. Like people will break, like, just don't go there, And then I had one student say, Jenny, if I stay here, can I walk to the hospital? I'm like, no, no, this is inner city. Like you're going to be getting up. No, don't walk to the hospital, please. Like it's like literally a 5-minute drive, but it's worth the cost of parking to ensure your safety, So just definitely something to think about. And as far as bringing family along, I think Marissa's right. As far as like, you're not really that present anyways with the commitment you're making. So is it really worth uprooting? But again, this is all personal choice. And I'm not naysaying if that's what you choose to do. And if you have the flexibility and can afford it, then by all means, and trust me, I'm a mom, like it would break my heart to think that I couldn't kiss my kids goodnight. Like honestly, just thinking about it makes me want to cry. can't imagine. I can't even imagine. And so my heart is with you if that is you and you're like, what am I going to do? This is so heartbreaking. And I have had students in clinical with me fight back tears when they talk about their family, because I don't mean to bring it up as a sore spot, but I just don't know. And so when they're like, well, I haven't seen my kids in 2 months, and I'm like, oh, like it hurts. It hurts to even hear it. So I feel for you if that's what you're getting ready to go through. But what I can reassure you is it's not going to change how your kids feel about you, and they're going to love you. You're still mama. They're going to come home and be super excited. And you're still daddy, men, women, it both goes both ways. So just hang in there, hang tight, and the payoff will be so worth it. It's going to be harder on you than it is for the children. I can tell you that.
That's good.
I think so, because the kids are just so oblivious. Like, as long as they're loved and they have what they need, they're fed, they're loved, like they're happy, and you can FaceTime these days. Yeah, you can FaceTime as long as they understand. Like, and I also have some parents tell me, like, if you include your family and your kids with what you're doing, saying like, when mommy's done or when daddy's done with school, we'll take a family vacation to Disney or something. That'll be our car. And so they're excited for you to finish too, because now they know they have a reward at the end as well. Right. Could be something fun to do. But kind of on to the next question I wanted to ask you. I guess you were talked about kind of, traveling for maybe a month at a time. I also want to point that out too, because I had that experience where a few of my specialty rotations were just for a month, and it was traveling. I had to stay in a resident call room. That was scary. I had bed bugs, but I ended up like staying with my other clinical buddy rotation on a couch instead.
Nice.
It was the night before my open heart rotation. I've probably told this story before, so I'm sorry if you're hearing it for a second time, but I was on my open heart rotation. So obviously I was terrified. My first day doing hearts. I never worked cardiac as an ICU nurse. I worked medical ICU. So, and it was, again, before we learned cardiac. So I had to do all my own studying. I worked so hard to go to that first rotation. And we get into out of town, unfortunately, late at night. We should have left earlier, but it was a 3-hour drive. And so we drove in, it was like 8:00 at night. The hospital's on lockdown for a stabbing, which we didn't know. We just knew the hospital's on lockdown. We're like, why can't we get in? We're sitting out high. We're like, why is the doors locked? Long story short, we commuted because we were poor and we wanted to save money. So we both drove together. She was staying at a hospital down like maybe 20 minutes down the road. Anyways, I finally get to my room and I starting to get unpacked, and I pull back the sheets and I see a little bug, and I'm like, ugh. So I look under the mattress and I see more bugs crawl into the mattress, and I'm like, oh my God. So at that point I call her and she's like, 9:00 at night now, and again, like I said, the whole hospital stabbing area lockdown, so I was like, don't worry about it. Don't come back and get me. I'll survive. I obviously have to be here the next morning for my clinical day. So I sat up all night long, you guys, like all night. I sat up and watched and looked around me and just tried to study more. And I'm thinking, I'll just study. I'll step on it and study. And my eyes were bloodshot. I remember I just got dressed in my scrubs for the next day and just sat in the chair and looked around and make sure I didn't have any bugs crawling on me. And
oh gosh.
And then I obviously told people about the bug problem the next day, and they're like, oh, thank you for letting us know. But then I just remember thinking, they're gonna think I'm like a druggie. I'm showing up just my eyes are inflamed and red, but I got through it. So, and then I went and stayed at the other hospital. And we just split hearts at the other hospital. So it is what it is. But like you said, you don't, for a month's time, you don't necessarily even get acclimated to not only the staff, but just where things are at. So it can be kind of high stress when you're rotating a lot. Right. What would you say is your favorite part of anesthesia so far? What's your favorite case? I'm just curious.
My favorite cases. I like a lot. I like a lot. I definitely like cardiac just because that's comfortable to me, even though there's a whole lot more that I'd have to learn in that regard. I really just like ortho. I like doing the spinals. I like doing the blocks. Pretty straightforward cases. I surprised myself. I really like OB. Did not expect to like OB at all. And I really, really enjoy the C-sections and epidurals. So cool. It's been kind of fun. I've had little, experiences with all the specialties, and I'm liking a whole lot more than I expected. So that's good.
Cool. What about endo? since your mom's endo?
I don't hate endo. I don't hate it. I know a lot of people are just like, no.
Yeah.
It's, it's busy, and it's high turnover. It's a lot of charting. It's a lot of like organizing your time with all the different patients. I don't hate it. But I was like talking to my mom about it. She's like, we're so nice to all the CRNAs. I don't know why everybody hates that. And I'm like, it's not you guys. It's just, it's a lot of work.
And they're usually like open airways, a lot of them.
Yeah.
They're LMAs, and they're like, they don't numb the vocal cords, then they cough in your LMA and spasm, and it's like, or they're in their left lateral position that's halfway on their stomach, and it's just they're leaking bile out of their mouth, or like, it can be not super fun from the anesthesia side of things.
Yes.
That's funny. I had to ask it. So that's interesting. OB, OB can be like a beautiful, amazing experience, but can also be for me, it was like, had a love hate. It was one of the most beautiful, amazing, rewarding things. And I love babies. Like, I just love babies. Like, if I was 20 years younger, that's really young, 10 years younger, I would have way more babies. But I love seeing babies being born. I just love it. But sometimes it can be really sad, and sometimes it can be really terrifying, like in a hot freaking second, you know what I mean? So you really have to be on your toes, and it's kind of like, it's two lives. I mean, you're always caring for mom, but telling mom baby's getting chest compressions, and, we'll update them. Like, it can be a very, sad, scary thing too. So we need people who want to do OB, because OB for me too is like a lot of PR, like PR in a sense, it's like patient satisfaction PR. We're like, they're not in the Ritz-Carlton, but they're having a baby, and that's something exciting, and they're looking forward to doing it for, they've been pregnant for 9 months. They're like, sweet, this is going to be an amazing experience. Sometimes it's not always an amazing experience for them. And so a lot of it is like making them as comfortable as possible, reassuring them they're scared, and so I did a lot of hand holding in OB. I would play my spa music for mom. I would talk her down. I would do a lot of things that I could to alleviate her. And of course, if she needed it, I would give her medicine too. But it became a lot of like just trying to get that experience such that they can walk away with good memories, but you can only do the best that you can with that sometimes. So yeah, cardiac, good for you, girl. Cardiac is like so much fun. Like I love cardiac. It's funny. Now that I work with kids though, like I don't want to do pediatric cardiac. I just don't. But adult cardiac, I love seeing a beating heart. Like I don't like seeing brains, and I really don't like ortho because it's just gross. It just seems barbaric. There's all the hammering and banging. A
lot of hammers.
Blood's flying everywhere. fat chunks. Ugh, it's just so gross. But like the heart, it's just so cool. The fact that you can drain you can take the blood out of someone's body, put it through a machine, and put it back in the body, all while you operate on the heart while they're asleep. It's just, I love it. It's just the coolest thing in the world to watch it and watch it stop beating and come back beating. It's just like, ooh, it's just so cool. So that's exciting that you love that. Embrace it. I wanted to do cardiac, kind of question whether I could, because I had such a kind of a crummy rotation in school, but it always fascinated me. So I made a point to just put the birdie out there when I started. Hey, I would like to join the cardiac team someday, thinking it would be like years down the road. And then like within the first 6 months, I had several other CRNAs like, are you ready? And I'm like now? They're like, yeah, like right now, like join the 24-hour team and come work with the new hearts. I'm like, are you sure you want me? Like I just graduated. And they're like, yeah, you'll be ready. You'll hit the ground running. And you do hit the ground running. So yeah, that's fun. So what would you say is your least favorite?
Well, I'm like trying to think, and I'm like, well, I guess it's endo.
Oh, Mom, you're not listening. Plug your ears.
I don't really have, it's not endo. I think it would be peds, and that's only because I don't have enough experience with it. I have only had 2 weeks so far.
Yeah.
And so it was the most foreign to me, and that's why I don't like it right now. I know I'm going to get a bunch more peds at my next rotation and the one following. And so I think the thing that you back away from the most is what you're the least familiar with. And so the pediatric dosing and all the differences there is something that you just have to know. It doesn't, so just having that always like very quickly in the back of your mind, all the pediatric dosing and pediatric emergencies and just very different physiology, respiratory wise, and being able to make some decisions very quickly based off of that. So
they're not little adults, that's for sure. They're like
no.
their own little beings.
Yes.
Oh, they're so cute. They're so cute.
Yeah. I think I started getting into it at the end of the second week, but now thinking about it again, I'm like, nope, like all that knowledge that it's gone. Like you just need repetition. So now I don't feel comfortable again.
You need repetition. And I can speak from being a CRNA for 7 years. Like when I made the choice to go to all pediatric hospital, I was scared because I'm like, Jenny, do I really want this? Like I even told the manager, I go, I'm not 100% willing to commit to this full time because I just don't know if I'm going to like it. Like I literally said, I don't know if I'm going to like it enough to want to work here full time. And I do, I love it. I love it there. Is it scary? Yeah. Like having a 1 kilo baby, and that's, I mean, it can be, or less. I mean, it could be terrifying. Definitely way scarier than adults, I will say. And the dose accuracy has to be on point, and so adults, you can get away with like a lot more, like a little reservoir tank. There you go. It's a little bit, it's okay. But like kids, if you misdose like neostigmine, for example, now they're weak, and now they have the effects of like the bradycardia, which could be bad for kids, and they're really dependent on their cardiac output from heart rate. So depending on the age. Now, don't get me wrong, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, they're little adults for the most part, but little babies are definitely their own little person. And so I get that. And I remember feeling scared in school. Was definitely one of my most stressful rotations as well. We had 3 months in peds, and that's what I ended with in school. And so it's funny because I ended with like hearts, OB, peds. I had not intubated any in adult. Like by the time I had my end of my specialties, and by the time I graduated and started working for like 8-9 months, like I was like, oh my gosh, like my first day as a CRNA, I'm like, please give me a baby, like give me a baby. And that didn't happen. And it's funny, you pick it back up, it does become kind of muscle memory. So don't worry if that happens to you. You will remember how to intubate. It'll come back to you quickly. But yeah, I think just being on point with your dosing for peds and understanding the physiology process and knowing that you have resources. I calculate drugs. I don't care if I think I know the dose. I always do my calculations, always. And so just, and there's resources. I use Vargo all the time to look things up. So, and I do ask questions a lot. I ask my coworkers questions like, hey, how would you do this case? I've never done this before. And even if it should be, I think I should know what I do, I still ask because why not? So I encourage you guys, if that's you, if you're scared to do something like that, just know that you're never going to be alone, that you're always going to have resources. And for me, picking what I liked became about like the job environment for me. Like, don't get me wrong, you want to look at what you do. But I mean, I could do ortho all day, even though I don't really like ortho, if the job environment was good. Same with neuro. I don't really like neuro, but if I found a really great place to work that did all neuro, I'd embrace it. So Marissa, this has been fun. Is there anything you would like to add as far as if someone say has like 3 or 4 schools to pick, like what would you, and maybe they're worried about being front loaded versus integrated or anything for that matter, like what kind of advice would you give them as far as how to decide?
I think overall, I think deep down how both of these programs will work for you. So one of my best friends who's in a different program, we've talked about it several times, and we both are like, I don't know how I would be able to do your program. She loves the integrated. It's worked for her. Yes, it's had some, difficulties that we've talked about already with things not matching up. But she's also said, I don't know how you just don't have any clinical application to what you're learning until a year. So it, either way, there's no perfect school. So go into it like that. There's no perfect school that's going to check all of your boxes and you're going to be like, this is exactly catered to me. Like CRNA school is all about flexibility and you're just going to have to, give up a few things to take home what you need most out of school. So I think deep down, you probably already know what kind of program is going to work for you. And then if you're still kind of like on the fence, just try and talk to whoever you can. If you know anyone in that program, reach out. I have a lot of people reach out to me, ask me questions about my program. so just try and use your resources and just know how you study, kind of like what we mentioned before. Whether that application is going to work for you with integrated programs, or whether you're just more comfortable with getting it all done and then your tests are over with, and then you're just having to do a lot more refreshing right, the night before for everything.
Yeah, all great points. And I do agree that one of the benefits of an integrated is the fact that you get the application piece from clinical. But Marissa's right. No school's going to check all your boxes. It's just not out there. But what I will want to leave you guys with is you are in control of what you decide to do with your practice. If you got a crappy regional experience, go do it as a CRNA. What's stopping you? You'd be the only one stopping you from doing it. Just because you got a bad rotation. Like I just said, I had a terrible cardiac rotation. You know how many hearts I got? 5. And guess what? One of them was an observation. Yeah. I think I needed 5 hearts to take boards, but I've done hundreds of hearts now as a CRNA. And just with that 6 months post graduation, nonetheless. Same with my OB. I had 5 cardiac epidurals. I did a lot of thoracic epidurals as a CRNA, but like labor epidurals, I only had 5, which was the minimum. I had a terrible OB rotation too. I did tons of spinals. Never seemed to get out of the OR to go do epidurals. So they just kept me in the OR, do spinals all day, which was unfortunate. But I joined the open heart team and did 24-hour call, did a lot of OB. Yeah, I mean, did it feel kind of like a fish out of water and awkward? Yeah, but I learned you embrace what you want your practice to be. Don't let your experience in school deter you from chasing what you want in practice, whether that's independent practice, whether it's a practice who does a lot of regional. Go get it and own what you do with your career. You are capable. You are capable of learning. Most jobs are willing to train you on the job. Okay. And so don't just think because you didn't get it in school means you're not going to be qualified to do it as a CRNA. You'll never know unless you try. So, but I really think one thing that Marissa said, that yes, please, you guys talk to current students. This is going to be the best way to know if you're making the right choice. Because I mean, for me, it's like, are you satisfied? That's what I would ask a current SRNA. Are you happy? And it might not be perfect. No one expects perfection. It doesn't exist, first of all. I don't believe in perfection, but are you happy? Are you happy with your education, the way you're spending your money? And if the answer is yes, let the rest go, So, my internet's unstable. So I'll leave you guys with that today. Oh, can you hear me? Good thing we're ending this now. Yeah, the internet's becoming unstable, but Marissa, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you guys for tuning in this week. This has been a lot of fun and I hope very insightful for you. Tune in next week and don't forget to go ahead and leave me a review. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. All right. Bye. Bye, Marissa. Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.